Hi Year 5, hi Year 6. Today we are going to be reading chapter 5 of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. So let's have a look at our Vipers questions for today. Question 1 is a retrieval question. So list 3 objects found in Hagrid's coat pockets. Question 2 is an inference question. Why do you think that the first year students are not allowed to bring their broomsticks to school? And the last question is a vocab question. Which word best describes the Leaky Cauldron pub? So there's 3 options. We've got, is it modern, pungent or grimy? Okay, so have a think about those questions while you're listening to the story. Jot them down and then we can go through them afterwards. Okay, so chapter 5 is called Diagon Alley. Harry woke up early the next morning. Although he could tell it was daylight, he kept his eyes shut tight. It was a dream, he told himself firmly. I dreamed a giant called Hagrid came to tell me I was going to a school for wizards. When I open my eyes, I'll be at home in my cupboard. There was suddenly a loud tapping noise. And there's Aunt Petunia knocking on the door, Harry thought, his heart sinking. But he still didn't open his eyes. It'd been such a good dream. All right, Harry mumbled, I'm getting up. He sat up and Hagrid's heavy coat fell off him. The hut was full of sunlight, the storm was over, and Hagrid himself was asleep on the collapsed sofa, and there was an owl rapping its claw on the window, a newspaper held in its beak. Harry scrambled to his feet, so happy he felt as though a large balloon was swelling inside him. He went straight to the window and jerked it open. The owl swooped in and dropped the newspaper on top of Hagrid, who didn't wake up. The owl then fluttered onto the floor and began to attack Hagrid's coat. Don't do that! Harry tried to wave the owl out of the way, but it snapped its beak fiercely at him and carried on savaging the coat. Hagrid, said Harry loudly, there's an owl! Pay him, Hagrid grunted from the sofa. What? He wants to pay him for delivering the paper. Look in the pockets. Hagrid's coat seemed to be made of nothing but pockets. Bunches of keys, slug pellets, balls of string, mint humbugs, tea bags. Finally, Harry pulled out a handful of strange-looking coins. Give him 5 nuts, said Hagrid. Nuts? Yeah, the little bronze ones. Harry counted out 5 little bronze coins, and the owl held out its legs so he could put the money into a small leather pouch that was tied to it. Then it flew off through the open window. Best be off, Harry. Lots to do today. Got to get to London and buy all your stuff for school. Harry was turning over the wizard coins and looking at them. He had just thought of something which made him feel as though the happy balloon inside him had got a puncture. Hagrid? Said Hagrid, who was pulling on his huge boots. I haven't actually got any money, and you heard Uncle Vernon last night. He won't pay for me to go and learn magic. Don't you worry about that, said Hagrid, standing up and scratching his head. Do you think your parents didn't leave you with anything? But if their house was destroyed, they didn't keep their gold in the house, boy. Nah, first stop for us is Gringotts, Wizard's Bank. Have a sausage, they're not bad cold, and I wouldn't say no to a bit of birthday cake neither. Wizards have banks? Yeah, just the one. Gringotts. It's run by goblins. Harry dropped the bit of sausage he was holding. Goblins? Yeah, so you'd be mad not to rob it. I'll tell you that. Never mess with goblins, Harry. Gringotts is the safest place in the world for anything you want to keep safe. Except maybe Hogwarts. As a matter of fact, I've got to visit Gringotts anyway for Dumbledore Hogwarts business. Hagrid drew himself up proudly. He usually gets me to do important stuff for him. Fetching you, getting things on Gringotts. Knows he can trust me, see? Got everything? Come on then. Harry followed Hagrid onto the rock. The sky was quite clear now and the sea gleamed in the sunlight. The boat Uncle Vernon had hired was still there with a lot of water in the bottom after the storm. How did you get here? Harry asked, looking around the other boats. Flew, said Hagrid. Flew? Yeah, but we'll go back in this. Not supposed to use magic now I've got you. They settled down in the boat. Harry still staring at Hagrid, trying to imagine him flying. Seems a shame to row, though, said Hagrid, giving Harry another one of his sideways looks. If I was to, speed things up a bit, would you mind not mentioning it to Hogwarts? Of course not, said Harry, eager to see more magic. Hagrid pulled out the pink umbrella again, tapped it twice on the side of the boat, and they sped off towards land. Why would you be mad to try and rob Gringotts? Harry asked. Spells. Enchantments, said Hagrid, unfolding his newspaper as he spoke. They say there's dragons guarding the high security vaults. And then you've got to find your way. Gringotts is hundreds of miles under London, see? Deep under the underground. You'd die of hunger trying to get out, even if you did manage to get your hands on something. Harry sat and thought about this while Hagrid read his newspaper, The Daily Prophet. Harry had learned from Uncle Vernon that people liked to be left alone while they did this, but it was very difficult. He'd never had so many questions in all his life. Ministry of Magic messing things up as usual, Hagrid muttered, turning the page. So, there's a Ministry of Magic? Harry asked before he could stop himself. Of course, said Hagrid. They wanted Dumbledore for minister, of course, but he'd never leave Hogwarts, so old Cornelius Fudge got the job. Bungler if ever there was one. So he belts Dumbledore with owls every morning asking for advice. But what does the Ministry of Magic do? Well, their main job is to keep it from the Muggles that there's still witches and wizards up and down the country. Why? Why, blimey, Harry, everyone be wanting magic solutions to their problems. Nah, we're best left alone. At this moment, the boat bumped gently onto the harbour wall. Hagrid folded up his newspaper and they clambered up the stone steps onto the street. Passers-by stared a lot at Hagrid as they walked through the little town to the station. Harry couldn't blame them. Not only was Hagrid twice as tall as anyone else, he kept pointing at perfectly ordinary things like parking meters and saying loudly, "See that, Harry? Things like these muddles dream up, eh?" Hagrid, said Harry, panting a bit as he ran to keep up. "Did you say there's dragons at Gringotts?" "Well, so they say," said Hagrid. "Crikey, I'd like a dragon." "You'd like one?" "Wanted one ever since I was a kid." "Right, here we go." They reached the station and there was a train to London in 5 minutes' time. Hagrid, who didn't understand muggle money, as he called it, gave the notes to Harry so he could buy their tickets. People stared more than ever on the train. Hagrid took up 2 seats and sat knitting what looked like a canary yellow circus tent. "Still got your letter, Harry?" he asked as he counted stitches. Harry took the parchment envelope out of his pocket. "Good," said Hagrid. "There's a list there of everything you need." Harry unfolded a second piece of paper he hadn't noticed the night before and read this. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Uniform. First year students will require 1. 3 sets of plain work robes in black. 2. 1 plain pointed hat in black for day wear. 3. 1 pair of protective gloves, dragon hide or similar. 4. 1 winter cloak, black, silver fastenings. Please note that all pupils' clothes should carry name tags. Set books. All students should have a copy of each of the following: The Standard Book of Spells by Miranda Goshawk, A History of Magic by Bathilda Bagshot, Magical Theory by Adalbert Waffling, A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration by Emmerich Switch, 1000 Magical Herbs and Fungi by Felinda Spore, Magical Draughts and Potions by Arsenius Sugar, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them by Newt Scamander, and The Dark Forces, A Guide to Self-Protection by Quentin Trimble. Other equipment: 1 wand, 1 cauldron, 1 set of crystal fields, 1 telescope and 1 set brass scales. Students may also bring an owl or a cat or a toad. Parents are reminded that first years are not allowed their own broomsticks. "So, can we buy all this in London?" Harry wondered aloud. "If you know where to go," said Hagrid. Harry had never been to London before, although Hagrid seemed to know where he was going. He was obviously not used to getting there in an ordinary way. He got stuck in the ticket barrier on the underground and complained loudly that the seats were too small and the trains were too slow. "I don't know how the Muggles manage without magic," he said as they climbed a broken-down escalator which led up to a bustling road lined with shops. Hagrid was so huge that he parted the crowd easily. All Harry had to do was keep close behind him. They passed bookshops and music stores, hamburger bars and cinemas, but nowhere that looked as if it could sell you a magic wand. This was just an ordinary street full of ordinary people. Could there really be piles of wizard gold buried miles underneath? Were there really shops that sold spellbooks and broomsticks? Might this not all be some huge joke that the Dursleys had cooked up? If Harry hadn't known that the Dursleys had no sense of humour, he might have thought so. Yet somehow, Even though everything Harry had told him so far was unbelievable, Harry couldn't help but trust him. "Right, this is it," said Hagrid, coming to a halt. "The Leaky Cauldron. It's a famous place." It was a tiny, grubby-looking pub. If Hagrid hadn't pointed it out, Harry wouldn't have noticed it was there. The people hurrying by didn't glance at them at all. Their eyes slid from the big bookshop on one side to the record shop on the other, as if they couldn't see the Leaky Cauldron at all. In fact, Harry had the most peculiar feeling that only he and Hagrid could see it. Before he could mention this, Hagrid had steered him inside. For a famous place, it was dark and shabby. A few old women were sitting in a corner drinking tiny glasses of sherry. One of them was smoking a long pipe, and a little man in a top hat was talking to the old woman. He was quite bold and looked like a gummy walnut. The loud buzz of chatter stopped when they walked in. Everyone seemed to know Hagrid. They waved and smiled at him, and the barman reached for a glass, saying, "The usual, Hagrid." "Can't tell I'm, on Hogwarts business," said Hagrid, clapping his great hand on Harry's shoulder and making Harry's knees buckle. "Good Lord," said the barman, peering at Harry. "Is this? Can't be." The Leaky Cauldron had suddenly gone completely still and silent. "Bless my honour," whispered the old man. "Harry Potter, what an honour." He hurried out from behind the bar, rushed towards Harry and seized his hand, tears in his eyes. "Welcome back, Mr. Potter. Welcome back." Harry didn't know what to say. Everyone was looking at him. The old woman with the pipe was puffing on it without realising it had gone out. Hagrid was beaming. Then there was a great scraping of chairs, and next moment, Harry found himself shaking hands with everyone in the Leaky Cauldron. "Doris Crockford, Mr. Potter, can't believe I'm meeting you at last. So proud, Mr. Potter, I'm just so proud. Always wanted to shake your hand, I'm all of a flutter. Delighted, Mr. Potter, just can't tell you. Diggle's the name, Dedalus Diggle." "I've seen you before," said Harry, as Dedalus Diggle's top hat fell off in his excitement. "You bowed to me once in the shop." "He remembers!" cried Dedalus Diggle, looking around at everyone. "Did you hear that? He remembers me." Harry shook hands again, and again Doris Crockford kept coming back for more. A pale young man made his way forward, very nervously. One of his eyes was twitching. "Professor Quirrell," said Hagrid. "Harry, Professor Quirrell will be one of your teachers at Hogwarts." "Potter," stammered Professor Quirrell, grasping Harry's hand. "Can't tell you how pleased I am to meet you." "What sort of magic do you teach, Professor Quirrell?" "Defence against the dark arts," muttered Professor Quirrell, as though he'd rather not think about it. Not that you need it, Potter?" He laughed nervously. "You'll be getting all your equipment, I suppose. I've got to pick up new books on vampires myself." He looked terrified at the very thought, but the others wouldn't let Professor Quirrell keep Harry to himself. It took almost 10 minutes to get away from them all. At last, Hagrid managed to make himself heard of all of the babble. "Must get on, lots to buy, come on, Harry." Doris Crockford shook Harry's hand one last time, and Hagrid let them through the bar and out into a small, walled courtyard, when there was nothing but a dustbin and some weeds. Hagrid grinned at Harry. "Told you, didn't I? Told you was famous. Even Professor Quirrell was trembling to meet you. Mind you, he's usually trembling." "Is he always that nervous?" "Oh yeah, poor bloke, brilliant mind. He was fine while he was studying out of books. Then he took a year off to get some first-hand experience. Then they say he met some vampires in the Black Forest, and there was a nasty bit of trouble with a hag. Never been the same since. He's scared of all the students, scared of his own subject. Now, where's my umbrella?" Vampires, hags. Harry's head was swimming. Hagrid, meanwhile, was counting bricks in the wall above the dustbin. 3 up, 2 across, he muttered. "Right, stand back, Harry." He tapped the wall 3 times with the point of his umbrella. The brick he had touched quivered, it wriggled in the middle, and a small hole appeared. It grew wider and wider. A second later they were facing an archway, large enough even for Hagrid, an archway onto a cobbled street which twisted and turned out of sight. "Welcome," said Hagrid, "to Diagon Alley." He grinned at Harry's amazement. They stepped through the archway. Harry looked quickly over his shoulder as the archway shrink instantly back into the solid wall. The sun shone brightly on a stack of cauldrons outside the nearest shop. Cauldrons, all sizes, copper, brass, pewter, silver, self-stirring, collapsible, and a set of sign hanging over them. Yeah, you'll be needing one of them, said Hagrid, but we've got to get your money first. Harry wished he had about 8 more eyes. He turned his head in every direction as they walked up the street, trying to look at everything at once. The shops, the things inside them, the people doing their shopping. A plump woman outside an apothecary's was shaking her head as they passed, saying, "Dragon liver, 16 sickles an ounce, they're mad." A low, soft hooting came from a dark shop with a sign saying, "Elop's Owl Emporium, Tawny, Screech, Barn, Brown and Snowy." Several boys of about Harry's age had their noses pressed against the window with broomsticks in it. "Look," Harry heard one of them say, "the new Nimbus 2000, the fastest ever." There were shops selling robes, shops selling telescopes, and strange silver instruments Harry had never seen before. Windows stacked with barrels of bat spleens and eel's eyes, tottering piles of spellbooks and quills and rolls of parchment, potion bottles, globes of the moon. "Gringotts," said Hagrid. They had reached a snowy white building which towered over all of the little shops. Standing beside its burnished bronze doors, wearing a uniform of scarlet and gold, was... "Yeah, that's a goblin," said Hagrid quietly as they walked up the white steps towards him. The goblin was about a head shorter than Harry. He had a swarthy, clever face, a pointed beard, and, Harry noticed, very long fingers and feet. He bowed as they walked inside. Now they were facing a second pair of doors, silver this time, with words engraved upon them. "Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed, for those who take but do not earn must pay most dearly in their turn. So if you seek beneath our floors a treasure that was never yours, thief, you have been warned, beware of finding more than treasure there." "Like I said, you'd be mad to try and rob it," said Hagrid. A pair of goblins bowed them through the silver doors, and they were in a vast marble hall. About 100 more goblins were sitting on high stools behind a long counter, scribbling in large ledgers, weighing coins on brass scales, examining precious stones through eyeglasses. There were too many doors to count leading off the hall, and yet more goblins were showing people in and out of these. Hagrid and Harry made for the counter. "Morning," said Hagrid to a free goblin. "We've come to take some money out for Mr. Potter's safe." "You have his keys, sir?" "Got it here somewhere," said Hagrid, and he started emptying his pockets onto the counter, scattering a handful of mouldy dog biscuits over the goblin's book of numbers. The goblin wrinkled his nose. Harry watched the goblin on their right, weighing a pile of rubies as big as glowing coals. "Got it," said Hagrid at last, holding up a tiny golden key. The goblin looked at it closely. "That seems to be in order." "And I've also got a letter here from Professor Dumbledore," said Hagrid importantly, throwing out his chest. "It's about you-know-what in Vault 713. "Very well," he said, handing it back to Hagrid. "I'll have someone take you down to both vaults. Griphook?" Griphook was yet another goblin. Once Hagrid had crammed all the dog biscuits back inside his pockets, he and Harry followed Griphook towards one of the doors leading off the hall. "What's the you-know-what in Vault 713, Hagrid?" Harry asked. "Can't tell you that," said Hagrid mysteriously. "Very secret. Hogwarts business. Dumbledore's trusted me. More than my job's worth to tell you that, Harry." Griphook held the door open for them. Harry, who had expected more marble, was surprised. They were in a narrow stone passageway lit with flaming torches. It sloped steeply downwards, and there were little railway tracks on the floor. Griphook whistled and a small cart came hurtling up the tracks towards them. They climbed in, Hagrid with some difficulty, and were off. I will leave it there for today.